Hi, Councilwoman.
How you doing?
Hello.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Councilwoman. Council President Paplaskis is driving back from New Jersey at this moment. So I'm going to be running the meeting, or at least until he chimes in, if he makes it at all. So he sends his apologies. Can somebody help me out? What are the prompts when somebody's on a phone if they need to raise their hand? Does anybody know?
*6 and *9.
*6 is raise your hand,
Correct.
and *9 is what?
*9 is to raise hand. *6 is to unmute.
Oh, 9 is to raise hand, 6 is to unmute.
Correct.
All righty. *9 raise hand. Okay. I want to wait another minute or two to get started. Give everybody a chance. We have a quorum, 1, 2, 3, 6. Rose? What do we need for a quorum? 6?
6, yes.
Okay, we have enough. I guess we're going to get started. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order a special meeting of the City Council for February 10th at 6 p.m. Rose, could you please take attendance?
Councilwoman Marino,
Present?
Councilwoman Mazzulli,
Present.
Councilwoman Vargas, Councilwoman Jermaine,
Present.
Councilman Donegan,
Present.
Councilman Campiano,
Present.
Councilman Riley, Council Vice President Ferry,
Present.
Council President Paplas.
Okay, tonight's meeting is a workshop to consider the American Rescue Plan Act funding, okay? So this is how we're gonna run the meeting tonight. First up will be a presentation from the City Council Budget Analyst, David DeMayo, as he did in the last meeting. So at this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Council Auditor David DeMayo.
Thank you all. Welcome. Tom, do you have the slide presentation that you can put up also? Thank you. So I'm going to go through the same issues in the same presentation as the last time, maybe a little bit more of an abridged version. First and foremost, we just have to realize that the funding we're receiving due to the ARPA funds is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the city of Cranston to forge forward in areas that are necessary to be infrastructure and be corrected, and to forge forward, to use the money to grow the city and help with issues that we had in the past. On the first slide, Tom, what I want to bring to everybody's attention, as I did before, the American Rescue Plan Act had direct funding. It wasn't just if the city got money and we had to disperse it accordingly. So there was the 3 levels of funding that actually was given. There was state funding, there was city and town funding, and there was school funding. Next slide. So as we're all aware, the state of Rhode Island received $1.2 billion in ARPA funding. The city of Cranston received, or will receive, $42.6 million in funding, which, as we stated in the past, that $7.9 million was used for revenue shortfalls in fiscal year ending budget of June 30th, 2022. Director Strom had supplied the council a list of the calculation and how it was calculated. And lastly, the Cranston School Department received the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Fund, which came under ARPA. They received $20.8 million to be dispersed at their own discretion under their requirements to have the money distributed. There may be some additional funding that the schools and the city and local businesses will be able to receive. Now that, as you well, is grants that the state are putting out. So there's also other opportunities for the city and the school department and local businesses to receive funding that may not come out of the city funding, that may come out of the state funding in which they appropriate to. Next slide, please, Tom. So a few notes to be aware of, to keep in mind. The Treasury rules have been finalized, but do not take effect until April 1st. Basically, what this means is the cities and towns and the organizations that have appropriated money under the unfinalized rules can still use that, or they have an option to maybe use the rules that'll go into effect April 1st of 2022. The goal was not to let them stop the progress. Secondly, the Treasury is continuing to update facts This is not CARES or CRF, so there's no urgency to spend immediately. The key to the decision-making is to be aware that the deadline to appropriate costs is December 31st of 2024. And what that means is to allocate it to projects that everybody agrees upon. Secondly, the deadline to distribute or disperse the funds is December 31st of 2026. The Treasury's compliance and reporting guidelines haven't been finalized. I believe in the last presentation, Director Strom had said that they've been filing the requirements that they need to, but they haven't had any other disbursements outside of the initial revenue loss. Next slide, please. Things to keep in mind is we have to be very, very cautious not to rush to spending without a plan. We want to make sure that we read and understand the guidelines. We want all our award terms and conditions under the statute to meet the requirements when we fund. We don't want to be liable to be paying money back. And the biggest thing that I've been reading and some of the seminars I've taken is you don't want to be making premature commitments that might not fall within guidelines or timelines. Because again, we don't want to risk is the city has to pay it back. And the other thing that we have to remember is that the city's responsible for spending and reporting these funds. And we have to be very cautious and we have to be very accountable for what we do in the record keeping we keep. Next slide, please. So there are 4 areas of broad scope where the funds can be used. And everything will fall under these 4 areas. So obviously to respond to public health emergencies with respect to the coronavirus disease, negative impacts, including assistance to households, small business, nonprofits, impact. So in industries impact such as tourism, travel. Secondly, premium pay to essential workers, which are considered frontline workers, through emergency grants to eligible employees. Thirdly is the one that we used already, was for service revenue loss. So there was a calculation there. It came in 2 phases. You could do a financial calculation, or you could elect just to allocate 10 million in lost revenue at one time, and that's it through all your funding. And lastly, it's to make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband. Next slide, please. So what I put together here, which we went through a little bit more in depth the last time, each of the areas, these are suggested areas that are covered under public health. In thinking of public health with a reference to the pandemic, would be anything that would benefit us to track, testing, tracing, materials to prevent. Any of those areas have coverage. Services, mental health, substance abuse, those are all areas that some of this money can be allocated to. Next slide, please. And then with the negative impact aspect of it, these are all the other areas that we could allocate funding to. You know, food programs, rent and mortgage assistance, cash transfers, internet access, eviction prevention, job training. These are all areas under the negative impact section of it that actually are covered also. Now, again, I'm only giving, so you're aware, I'm only giving an overview of the areas where they can be refined to specific needs of the Cranston community. Tom, next slide, please. Again, this is what the premium pay calculation was, which was the third, I believe, in the priority. So it's any frontline worker that makes under a certain level of pay annually could make an additional pay either through grants to frontline businesses that are out there, nursing homes, care facilities, and through a grant system. So this is one of the other areas that the community can benefit for it. Next slide, please. And then in the infrastructure section of it, it specifically is for infrastructure for water, clean water, and broadband. So obviously there's a variety. So wastewater treatment, collection, conveyance, overflows, stormwater, energy conservation, water conservation, drinking water treatment and transmission and distribution, and obviously broadband upgrades so everybody has access to the internet. The last couple of things I want to touch on before we go to the next slide is the process the government put together in doing this round of funding was to prepare cities and towns, states, and schools for another event like this, another pandemic, another catastrophic event. The goal is to be prepared and not have the downtime in the economic loss as long as it was this time. So their goal was to give you the tools and the infrastructure going forward, so this wouldn't happen again to the capacity that happened this time. The last slide is areas that when I did the research and did a few of the seminars, these are some of the ideas that came across that were more in the majority and more what cities and towns and states were doing, whether it was, clean up stormwater holding ponds, community development for housing, replacement of asbestos and lead pipes, right down to the last one of capital investments in public facilities. The goal is to bring us current, in a sense, with all these areas that have lacked over the years, which caused part of the problems that happened when the pandemic occurred, and we were limited to being able to do certain things. So the last thing I wanted to do prior to any of the council's questions. So in our last meeting, I did a spreadsheet and had a calculation. So we had roughly 50 people or so that participated in the meeting. We had 18 people who spoke, and there was an abundance of questions out of the 18 people. So I kind of broke it down to the areas that are covered in general, which we spoke about, but also to try to respond to a couple of questions that I had to do some research and maybe waiting on some answers. So of the 18 people, there was about 9 or so people who asked about housing, just based in this presentation. Housing in some way, shape, or form, based on what the decision would be covered. There were 2 people who spoke about broadband, and obviously broadband infrastructure is one of the items that would be covered. Again, it's just what plan gets put in place. We had 2 people speak about additional tree planting. I'm going to give a broad statement. It can be covered, but I think it comes along with other projects where additional trees will be planted. I'm waiting to hear back to see if there is a specific area that would fall under, just to allocate funding to do additional plantings across the city. So I just want to get a little better clarification. But if there was an infrastructure that was done somewhere, obviously some of the vegetation would have to be replaced, some of the trees would have to be replaced. That would come under the bigger project. One person had a question about preparing for the next pandemic. Obviously, that's what the plan is for. One person had a question about solar panels. I need to do a little more research, but if there was a capital improvement that fell under the requirements and that was going to be the energy source, I believe it's something that could be adapted, but I don't necessarily think grants could be given out to put solar panels on homes. We had revenue loss, which we know is covered. One other person had asked about the indoor shooting range. I have to do more research on that to see if that would be considered public safety. So I don't have a definitive answer. There was one person with stormwater, which is covered. Two people asked about grants to local businesses for loss of, whether it was replacement of licenses. Again, it's something that can be done, but the plan or the grant program has to be designed. And lastly, there was one person who asked about funding the OPEB. And I spoke with Director Strom, and if Director Strom wants to add to it, but we currently are on track going forward based on what our percentage of calculation is. So I'll let Director Strom just elaborate on that item if he would like to.
Thank you, David. Yes, a couple of years ago, we did not fund the OPEB at 100%. We basically funded it at 50% to have a balanced budget. We've since made that up in the last year, and we intend to do it going forward. The actuarial report reflects that short payment. So it has been recaptured in the actuarial report and in the ARC that we're going to be paying this year and next year. So we have made up for that. Fortunately, our rate of return of our investments have been very good. And overall, right now, between the pension fund for next year and the OPEB contribution for next year, if you combine the two, it's going to be less than what we contributed for this year. So I feel that we've been able to make up that difference, and I don't think that it would be necessary to fund the OPEB contribution any more than what we're doing going forward here for 22 and 23.
Thank you, Director, very much. And lastly, kind of in closing, no matter what decisions are made with any of the funding, I think we all have to realize it's an opportunity to bring Cranston up to speed in a lot of areas, and that we can't miss out on building a better foundation going forward with doing infrastructure and doing things that will never end. We need reoccurring items. We need plans and programs and projects that are going to last for a longer period of time. We have to focus on being able, if something happens the next time, there's something in place that is going to make Cranston come out of the issue or work through it faster. We have to just make sure that the funding lasts as long as we can get it to last, and have the projects work together with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMayo. At this time, I'd like to ask if the Finance Director, Robert Strom, has anything to add to David's presentation, or anything that you wanted to put in yourself.
Yes, thank you, Councilman Ferry. A couple of things. We went out to bid for polling. We had two companies that responded to our RFP. We are going to meet in BOCAP on Tuesday, February 15th to award. There's one candidate. I won't say who at this point, but there's one candidate that I feel is stronger than the other that I think the council will be happy to support. Both bids, based on the resolution of 25,000, is under. They're both under 20,000 actually. It's just slightly under. and that will be disclosed at BOCAP on Tuesday. But I think a couple of things that were brought up during that discussion about the resolution was that the company that, and again, I don't want to disclose it yet, one of the companies is a minority business and also will be polling both in English and Spanish. And I think that was something that was asked about and was hoping that could get accomplished through the resolution. So that's a positive. I have been receiving from various departments, specifically Public Works, Fire, IT for broadband, things that are applicable that could be helpful, specifically in IT, cybersecurity. That's something that's we need to upgrade and bring ourselves to a more current status to not leave ourselves vulnerable through any hacking in the future. Public Works is looking to do some sewer projects. Fire is looking for some infrastructure and also some equipment. And also Parks and Recreation, we're looking at some recreation facilities and things that would enhance the facilities that are currently being used and possibly even having some additional project done. So these are all things that we're looking at. I believe, obviously, based on the ordinance, the council, it'll be brought to the council when we do have a list of items, and hopefully we'll get the council's input, and maybe we'll be able to come up with a game plan that would be beneficial going forward and down the road for the citizens of the city. One thing I want to suggest is that be cautious. Coming from a financial background, be cautious, be somewhat conservative how we spend the money, because we do not want to create any type of structural deficit down the road in 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. We want to make sure that whatever we do, we're going to try to maintain the same level of services, but not impose a tax burden on the citizens of the city. And so that's all on the table to be discussed as well. And that's about it.
Thank you, Director Strom. At this time, would the administration like to weigh in on any comments they'd like to make about the ARPA funding?
Sure thing, Councilman. The only thing that I really want to pass along is Mr. Strom mentioning some projects that he received, I guess, from departments. Up in the third floor, there are no preconceived notions. We're here to listen to the public, and we are happy to hear from the public before much going down the path of and making any recommendations. So that's where the administration stands at this time.
Thank you, Director Moretti. Before we move on to the any council members having any comments, I just wanted to clarify something. At the beginning of Director Strom's talk just now, what he was referring to was the city is going to conduct a poll asking people, citizens, what they think we should do with the money besides this forum. And there is also going to be a survey conducted by the council. So there's going to be 3 different ways we're asking people how we should spend the money. So there's going to be a poll that the city administration is going to take care of. The council is doing these 2 forums, and also the council is doing a survey. So there's going to be, after all 3 of those things are done, then we're going to sit down and start meeting on the best use for the money. So just for that. At this time, do any council members want to take maybe 2 minutes to make any comments on the ARPA funding before we start the public forum? If so, please raise your hand. Councilman Donegan.
Thank you, Council Vice President Ferry. Nothing specific to the funds themselves this evening. I just want to say thank you again to everyone that is here this evening from the public to participate.
Thank you. Any other council members? Councilwoman Renzulli.
Hi, thank you, Councilman Ferry. I just wanted to say that in regards to the survey, right now, Councilwoman Vargas and I have worked with Auditor DeMayo on it, and Councilwoman Vargas is currently doing some translation in Spanish. And as soon as that is all set, the city will have a webpage up that we can place the survey, both surveys on in Spanish and in English. And I just don't want to give an exact date. We want it to be out for 30 days. And I don't have an exact date until it's completely translated and up on the website. But so stay tuned for that. I just want to let you know the progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, at this time, I'd like to move on to public comments. So if you are a member of the meeting right now, please raise your hand if you would like to make public comment in reference to how the city should spend the ARPA funds. We're going to limit your testimony to 4 minutes. And please try and stay on target to the topics that Auditor DeMayo referred to. So at this time, we will let Mr. Lima let you into the room. He'll let you into the meeting, and you will have 4 minutes to speak. So Mr. Lima, you want to get started with that?
Account name,
Okay.
clear, stop me, or
Okay, and I'd like to remind everyone to please state your name and address for the record before you start speaking, and you will have 4 minutes. And at the end of the 4 minutes, I will ask you to please finish up. Claire, you may
Yes,
begin.
I'm here. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am Claire Stadtmuller of 9637 7 Mile Road. On January 27th meeting, my colleague Sheila Ressiger and I provided information on why in spending ARPA money on broadband, it must be the safe, fast, cost-effective, future-proof, wired fiber to the premises and not the wireless that is a pollutant, pulsing microwave radiation at dangerous levels while guzzling energy and enabling surveillance. And Mr. Strom talked about hacking tonight, and I failed. I'm sorry, Mr. Strom. I will have to email you the same letter that I provided to Mr. DeMayo and all the city council members and the mayor, as we said, in response to the talk about smart meters. So I prefaced that letter by saying that one's area of expertise may prevent one from knowing the whole picture on so-called smart meters and the brand 5G because they're only 24 hours in a day. I will preface my abbreviated salient points tonight on dangerous radiation by getting a little personal. I am an opera singer, not to be confused with ARPA, but I am an opera singer and former college music professor. I do not enjoy reading about radiation and gigahertz, yet I have for 3 years because I have a passion for truth and for healthy living, which I would like to share with my fellow Rhode Islanders to protect them and the pollinators on which we depend. I dedicate a great deal of time and energy at the detriment of my own financial well-being. So in future, I would appreciate receiving a simple reply to the emails I send for the sake of clarity in communication and for the simple respect any active constituent deserves. So now I will go forward with my content. I can always resend those emails, but I heard no response. So in summarizing what I sent in my emails, and then I will also provide it to you, Mr. Strom, you need to be aware that so-called smart meters pulse microwave radiation into homes. Even a neighbor's smart meter can reach another person's home. I provided a 3-minute video which shows the change in cell structure when exposed to the assault for only 2 minutes. And it is an assault. A smart meter assaults the people in the house with microwave radiation. I provided a website with a plethora of information about the reasons to avoid smart meters for measuring gas, water, and electricity. People across the country have been sickened by this radiation, and states such as Massachusetts are considering bills to allow residents to opt out without a fee. How much more prudent and financially wise it is to prevent the wholesale installation of these meters in the first place. Smart meters have risks for security because secure wires protect your data and are without that, they can be hacked into. So-called public-private partnerships inevitably tend to introduce inherent conflicts of interest between the public and private for-profit investors. I provided a link to a science page that addresses, Mr. DeMeo, you had brought up such wonderful goals, wonderful goals. These can all be addressed with fiber to the premises. You mentioned mental health for first responders. Please note that in California, firefighters' ability to do their jobs was hampered by exposure to only 3G. Now we're talking 5G.
Claire, I need to ask you to please wrap it up.
Yes, all right. Mr. DeMeo, you had wonderful goals in protecting public health, safety, averting the next emergency. And I would say that fiber to the premises, not I, scientists, doctors, thousands of them, fiber to the premises meets these goals and wireless broadband defeats these goals. Gloucester, just on January 11th, voted unanimously with no discussion to connect its public buildings with fiber. I'm hoping to get their IT director to talk to Cranston's IT director. I will resend my email, which has all those links. And I
Thank you,
hope
Claire.
you'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Lima, who's next?
Warren Heyman.
Yes, hi. Thank you. My name is Warren Heyman. I live at 70 Arnold Avenue in the Edgewood part of the city. And thank you for having this evening's hearing and the last hearing. I want to just speak on behalf of the issue about trees. And I heard Mr. DeMeo's comments about the research he's doing on that. So obviously would defer to that. But I want to just say that adding trees to our community, I think, will help in the mental health of the people that live here. There's a lot of studies that have shown that communities with a lot of trees have less violence, as kids do better in school, et cetera. The city on an annual basis cuts down about, I think it's 200 trees per year, according to the city's tree warden. But right now the city allocates about $10,000 for the purchase of new trees, which allows us to buy about 25 new trees. So if we were to increase that, as we're suggesting, from 10,000 to 20,000, it would still mean that the net loss of trees per year is around 150, which does not have us going in the right direction if we're trying to expand the canopy, which is, again, helpful to the mental health of the people that live here. So just want to put a marker down for increasing, if possible, from $10,000 a year to $20,000 a year. Obviously, if we wanted to just replace the 200 trees that come down per year, we would need $80,000 a year. I understand that's probably more than what is appropriate, but would like to strongly advocate for increasing it from $10,000 a year this year to $20,000, and if we could, to $20,000 as well next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lehman, next person.
Annette Bourne.
Annette Bourne.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening. Please state your name and
evening.
address for the record.
Sure. Annette Bourne, 51 Community Drive. Good evening. I am honored to be speaking to you tonight on behalf of the Cranston Housing Commission in my capacity as newly elected chair. Mr. Vice President, we communicated in a letter to President Paplauskis dated February 7th that at the Cranston Housing Commission meeting of February 2nd, the membership voted to endorse a plan, which I am about to introduce, for the use of a portion of the city's ARPA funds toward the city's housing needs. In sum, it totals $7 million and includes the following allocations. 1.4 million home repair program for grants of up to $25,000 available for health and safety repairs, as well as energy efficiency and accessibility improvements to owner-occupied properties. Limited to homeowners earning below 80% of area median income, which for a family of 3, as of 2021, equaled $62,300. This program anticipates serving 50 to 60 homeowners. $250,000 for a consultant to identify affordable housing opportunities. Funding to hire a consultant includes conducting a campaign of community engagement to determine the housing needs and priorities. Identify potential sites and strategies for the development of affordable housing, and identify barriers to the development of these sites, included needing zoning changes or infrastructure extension if applicable. $5 million for acquisition and development of affordable housing. Funding may be used to acquire property, stabilize property, including demolition of blighted buildings, conduct pre-development work, including environmental testing and remediation, and development of affordable housing. Eligible properties must be encumbered with deed restrictions of at least 30 years and income restricted to households earning no more than 80% of area median income. This would be open to nonprofit and for-profit housing developers, as well as the Cranston Public Housing Authority. $150,000 toward homelessness diversion. This funding would support homelessness diversion grants of no more than $5,000 to address emergency household costs to prevent homelessness. Eligible households would need to earn below 50% of area median income, which again, for a family of 3 right now, would be $38,950. $200,000 for landlord incentive grants. This funding would provide incentives to landlords to rent to tenants with rental assistance vouchers, as well as grants to bring apartments up to housing quality standards. Landlords would receive grants of $1,000 for renting a unit for the first time to a tenant with a housing choice voucher or other publicly subsidized rental assistance vouchers, and $500 for each unit after. Landlords may also receive grants of up to $2,000 to reimburse them for necessary repairs identified during the pre-rent up unit inspection. These are programs that we have voted on and we approve to present to you all. We look forward to discussing these allocations in more detail with the council at your convenience. Thank you for your consideration and time to speak.
Thank you very much. And it's obvious that you have really done your homework, and we are really going to take a good look at what you're presenting. Thank you. Mr. Lima, next person.
Harrison Tuttle.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Harrison Tuttle. I reside at 131 Belmont Road. I am the Executive Director of Black Lives Matter Rhode Island Political Action Committee. I just want to mention for the record that my 2 questions regarding important issues regarding equity and affordable housing from the prior ARPA meeting had not been answered, despite this council saying that they would get back to me. So if members of the council could do that. But today I wanted to stress the importance of why we need to spend this generational opportunity in a way that centers Black, Indigenous people of color in our city. That is why today, collaboratively, I joined multiple Cranston residents, creating a way to spend our American Rescue Plan dollars. In it included multiple community-based solutions to invest in our BIPOC community here in Cranston. One of the recommendations included the Cranston Equity Rescue Plan, which would create a commission appointed by the city council made up of BIPOC residents, which would be able to identify the disparities caused by the pandemic, included economic, educational, and health, and offer target support to residents, all within the guidelines of this ARPA spending. Other recommendations included direct relief to Cranston residents and the implementation of a nationwide model program designed to improve the outcomes of police interactions with people dealing with mental illnesses. It is time that our Cranston law enforcement has the proper tools to respond more safely and compassionately with people who have serious mental illness. Crisis intervention training, or CIT as commonly known, gives officers options other than arrest and incarceration when they encounter people with mental illnesses. And I think it's really time that Cranston looks to improve public safety using this once in a generation opportunity for people of color. And I'll end by saying throughout the course of this city's history, addressing these types of issues have been made second priority when it came to addressing racial equity and inequalities. This is your chance as members of the city council to change the way Cranston deals with systemic racism and disparities from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll finally say that my hope is that this city council really does a better job when communicating meetings like this and getting back to residents. And I encourage every single one of you to look at the proposal that I jointly submitted to all of you and the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lima?
Michelle Stever.
Michelle Stever?
Yes, I'm here. My name is
Name
Michelle
it.
Stever, and I live at 126 Linden Road. I'd like to commend all of my fellow Cranston residents on their ideas and proposals, and I don't envy the council in making this hard decision on how to spend the money. So far, I'd love to fund everything that people have brought forward. I'm here to request that the city look at how we're funding and spending on our city property, and to encourage you to make decisions to make our city properties green, and investigate putting solar panels or ways that we can lower the cost of maintaining those buildings, so that in the future, our expenses as a city are lower, so that in the case of a pandemic in the future, the cost of maintaining our city government might be lower. And by installing solar panels on city property, there's a way to actually earn money for the city while lowering the costs of maintaining and providing electricity to those buildings. I'd also like to encourage the council to look at replacement of lead pipes. I believe that it's everyone's right to have clean and safe drinking water. And it shouldn't just be for the people who are able to afford to replace the pipes that are coming into their homes. There are cities in the state of Rhode Island that have been doing this for their residents. And I think this would be an opportunity for the city to make sure that every Rhode Island Cranston resident, at least, has access to safe, clean drinking water that goes into their homes. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Tom Wojcik.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Tom Wojcik, 11 Hall Place. I just wanted to.
Could you please repeat that?
11 Hall Place.
Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to support the housing initiative, and in thinking about that, I was glad to hear a previous speaker actually articulate a very extensive plan. And I just wanted to emphasize that I hope that the council realizes that there are many opportunities and ways of approaching this and not get stuck that this can't be done. I just wanted to highlight one, that is going on currently in the Hartford, Connecticut area called the South Side Institutions Neighborhood Alliance, which has taken a number of not-for-profit and profit organizations, and with funding from county and state programs, have been able to put what they call the Cena Cityscape Project, which provides housing opportunities for first-time home buyers through the purchase and rehabilitation of boarded up, tax delinquent, and abandoned homes in Hartford. The program now in phase 7 will create 4 new home ownership opportunities. When the renovation work is complete, the properties will be available for purchase by low and moderate income first-time home buyers. There will be 11 housing units on the market for home ownership opportunities and 7 rental units. Thus far, the partnership between the 4 local organizations has led to 83 redeveloped buildings for new home buyers in recent years. That would be a blessing to Cranston to have unoccupied or buildings that are not really meeting codes to be redeveloped and be contributing to the community. To sum it up with this last quote from the article, renovating these vacant, blighted property improves public safety, provides a family with a healthy income in which to build generational wealth, and gives the community a committed neighbor who will take pride in their property. And I think that's what Cranston needs, is a way to get more and more people committed to Cranston, take pride in our city. And I think housing is the key to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Account name David.
David?
Hi, David Baldwin, 67 Fordson Avenue, and I'm just a private citizen, but if I had just gone through a pandemic and I had a bunch of money to spend, I would be, well, I have I would be spending it, first of all, on making sure that my systems were solid for the next time this happens. So that means making sure that not only do we have safe drinking water, but that we can get rid of the water that falls on the city so that we don't end up flooding anywhere. Putting in good old-fashioned ground-based broadband for the city. So especially anything the city can do to provide its own broadband or make sure that it has broadband if broadband from the major providers would become unavailable for some reason or become too rarefied to be operable in an emergency, and housing to get people off the street, to make sure that there were people who had a place to go, whatever was happening. But I also had a question, which was, does the city have any kind of audit or compilation of effects of the pandemic on the city, such that we have some profile of knowing how the pandemic affected Cranston and, you know, where it hurt and what we might want to fix so that we don't get hurt that bad in that way the next time? That would be my question to the council. And you don't have to answer it right this minute, but I would raise that question for the council to consider.
Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you very much. Director Strom and Auditor DeMayo, could you please make note of that question so we can get back to Mr. Baldwin at another time? Thank you.
Ariana Connor.
So noted.
Thank you. Ariana?
Hello, my name is Ariana Cunha and I live at 60 Lockwood Street in the Edgewood area. And I'm hub coordinator of Sunrise Rhode Island Youth. We are an organization of over 200 high school and middle school students fighting for climate justice, mostly located here in Cranston. I was 7 years old when Hurricane Sandy hit Rhode Island. I didn't understand what was going on or why there was water in my basement. I was scared of that water, even with my bright pink boots on. Our driveway was flooded. I looked out my window and a family was canoeing my neighbor's backyard, a space that was a field of grass just the day before. Ever since that day, whenever it rains too hard, I go down to my basement and make sure nothing paper is touching the ground for fear there might be another flood. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you to ensure that no other child in this city has to be introduced to the climate crisis as horrifically as I was. It is critical that this state invest in resiliency infrastructure to mitigate flooding, including rain catchment landscaping, pocket parks, street trees, and other sustainable interventions in frontline communities. The climate crisis is certainly here and affecting families across Cranston. It's time that it is finally addressed. It is time that I no longer live in fear of storms. Additionally, it is also critical that Cranston starts to consider clean water a human right. Cranston must invest in creating a fund that would provide grants to replace private side lead service pipes for lower income homeowners. There are 6,114 private side lead service pipes remaining in the city of Cranston. This is unacceptable. Our city deserves clean drinking water. Again, I remind you, we have the money to make sure everyone in this city has what they need to be successful. And again, I ask, do you want to be the council members who simply lowered taxes, or you want to be the council members that created a livable city? My question for you tonight again is, how big will you dream? Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you very much, Ariana.
Bill Michelini.
Bill McElhenney, you can unmute yourself, please.
Good evening. Yeah, my name is Bill McElhenney. I live at 45 Pasture View Lane. First of all, thank you to the council for scheduling this special meeting to collect public input. I'm certainly going to take advantage of the opportunity to have my voice heard. Having heard some of the previous speakers, my issue is is certainly much smaller in scale and scope, but maybe no less important in the long run, because it's a public safety issue. In this case, regarding the bike path. And I might first mention that the term bike path is a bit of a misnomer. Many communities call it a multi-use facility. And I can tell you, as a regular user of the facility, there are a lot more people on there that are not on bikes than are on bikes. There's kids on skateboards, there's mothers pushing baby carriages, there's seniors just going out for a walk on a sunny day. And I'd like to suggest that there might be a need for some kind of traffic signal at several intersections to protect these varied users from the vehicular traffic that may be coming through. I'm not exactly sure how you would implement this. I'm not suggesting a full-blown stoplight with a pedestrian button, but there may be some kind of warning signal to let the cars know that there could be somebody coming along, popping out from, in many cases, these intersections are kind of screened by trees and other infrastructure. Just a way to let them know there might be something coming. By way of example, I would recommend Main Street in Coventry. Main Street is also Route 117 in Coventry, where there seems to be some kind of system in play where when somebody approaches on the bike path, it triggers, I'm not sure if it's a flashing light or whether it's a red light or a yellow light, but some kind of warning to the cars that there's people coming one way or another. And again, from firsthand experience, I can tell you it's very effective. The cars respect the light, the cyclists and the pedestrians respect the cars. It's a very effective way to put some safety into the system. I would suggest 4 different locations where we might want to put some kind of light in place. From the north end of the city at Garfield Street outside of Lowe's. Then again, further south at Dyer Avenue, and again at Uxbridge Street, and maybe at Sherman Avenue. Short and sweet. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. McElhenney.
Christina Brown.
Christina Brown?
Good evening. My name is Christina Brown. I live at 217 Armington Street. Thank you, Council Vice President and members of the Council, for the chance to speak tonight. As you already are aware, the ARPA funds represent a chance to mitigate the disparities caused by the pandemic and invest in our communities to bolster a resilient future. I've worked with a few residents who are on this call to develop a proposal, which was submitted to you this afternoon, on how these funds could be invested to do just that. While our proposal addresses more than housing, including racial equity, mental health, and sustainability efforts, which others have spoken to tonight, I want to underline how it is critically important to address the housing crisis in our city. As you know, we do not meet the statutory obligation of maintaining 10% of affordable housing, and we haven't built any new affordable low to moderate income housing units in over a decade. We have at least 72 homeless students in our public schools, and our neighborhoods have gotten more expensive over the pandemic, offering less housing options. These funds can create a pathway to making Cranston a resilient community where all residents have a safe, affordable, healthy home. And due to the time it takes to build housing, any allocation you're considering to address this issue needs to be approved as soon as possible to make a meaningful impact. We propose in our proposal $13 million investment in our housing stock to mitigate the low vacancy rate and the prevalence of substandard housing in our neighborhoods. This includes $8 million in the development of affordable housing, which is critical infrastructure both to accommodate the needs of the workers that are employed in local small businesses, but allow our aging residents safe, affordable units to downsize. The $13 million also includes $2 million for home repair funds to assist homeowners, specifically landlords, in bringing their units up to minimum housing standards required by law, including lead safe certificates. The remaining funds include line items for permanent supportive housing and emergency housing solutions to assist our housing insecure and unsheltered neighbors. We are happy to meet with you at any time to discuss this proposal and offer resources and supports in this process. Additionally, I want to thank you for outlining the efforts to engage residents further with the survey and other public input that you are going to take on. But I'm wondering how you will proceed in notifying residents as you decide to spend these funds. And another question I have, or I would urge you to administer the survey in more languages than just English and Spanish, as we have a significant Asian population and Southeast Asian population in the city. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Christina.
Michael Brogard.
Michael Beauregard.
Hello, my name is Michael Beauregard from 136 Bluff Avenue. And I want to start by thanking Councilors Ferry, Marino, and Donegan for being here tonight to listen to the testimony. And thank you also for taking the lead on these meetings. So I'll keep my comments brief. I have a few things to touch upon. So first off, I just want to make a mention for prioritizing some amount of ARPA funding to address the childcare crisis that's ongoing across the state, but particularly in Cranston. As a very new parent who has two sons who I was lucky to be able to get into childcare, I'm currently looking at somewhere between 23 and 25% of our household income going to covering that cost. And so I know I'm actually doing relatively much better than most in the city, and can only imagine what, kind of medium income families must be going through. I saw many providers that were looking at $300, $400 a week for childcare services. And so this is really clearly unsustainable and not accessible to a wide range of folks. Thankfully, there was a program that opened last month in my neighborhood. And so that was the only way I was able to get in. Otherwise, I would have been looking at 6 to 9 month waiting periods. I'd also like to put a plug in for the trees proposal that has been previously mentioned. I think $80,000 is a relative drop in the bucket for the amount of funding, and is certainly something we should be looking at in terms of the sustainability and green impact that that kind of an investment might have across the city. I also would like to support the idea of the lead remediation funding, or support for lead remediation, particularly not the mains, but the leads for houses. As previous speakers have noted, it's really inaccessible for a lot of households across the city to support the cost of replacing their lead leads for their house. And that's where we know a lot of the contamination happens. And my house, being over 100 years old, has pretty high lead levels. So as a new parent, I'm really concerned about that. I'd also mention that the federal infrastructure bill that was passed recently has $2.9 billion for lead remediation, and Rhode Island is slated to receive $2 billion from that bill. So I would encourage the council to be aggressive in lobbying our state leaders to see what funding we can procure from that, and try not to use ARPA funds for this if possible. And then finally, I also want to definitely support the previous proposals for housing as what was presented by Annette Bourne and the housing group that she's been a part of. Certainly, I think housing is really inaccessible for a lot of our median and lower income residents. And so just being thoughtful about what we can do with the money we have and the timeline we have to spend it to try and really make some impact for those who are most housing insecure in the city. In particular, I think some of the proposals around repairs and making, kind of bridging the gap for folks who are unable to purchase, I think would be really thoughtful investments. And finally, I just want to, again, thank the councilors who are here today. I know you have been leading the charge. There has been a intent, I believe, to do a survey, but as far as I understand, it's been over 3 months, and a survey has not been put out by the administration or the council. And I do want to be mindful about making sure that we get that out in the near future, so that there's sufficient time for that to be responded to, as well as for that to inform the process. I think we're getting close to March and the need to start to come to some recommendations. I mean, I would also just like to reiterate what Christina mentioned earlier about the need to communicate out the decision-making process, because that seems like that would be of great value to residents to understand how priorities were set for this funding. Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate your having these hearings. So thank you.
Candace Brown Casey.
Hi there. Thank you very much. My name is Candace Brown Casey. I'm a resident of 68 Knollwood Avenue in Ward 3. First, I just want to echo a lot of the sentiments that we've heard tonight and at the previous meeting, especially as pertain to housing, affordable housing in particular. I just bought my first house back in January of last year, and decided to move from Warwick to Cranston. It was absolutely the right choice. And it's just important that, all of our neighbors have the same opportunity for housing security, especially when we have this influx of money to assist. And I'd also like to loan my voice to the calls for attention to be paid to child care. As we've heard repeatedly in the news, women in particular and mothers have been hard hit by job losses during the pandemic, particularly due to issues with child care. I don't have kids myself, but I think it's just an absolute crucial issue. But primarily tonight, I wanted to speak as a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. The American Rescue Plan Act allows for local governments to utilize these funds to address gun violence. And I encourage Cranston to fund anti-violence programs so that these programs have the funds needed to succeed. Localities can utilize ARPA funds to prevent or address gun violence in cities because we know that increases in rates of gun violence in our communities can be traced to the onset of the pandemic, and violence intervention professionals are performing essential frontline work to protect public health and interrupt gun violence. Since the beginning of the pandemic, there have been at least 5 shootings in my ward, Ward 3, including a recent shooting on Cranston Street. And therefore, I urge Cranston to take an important step towards ending gun violence by using a portion of the American Rescue Plan Act funds to support community violence intervention programs, which will help decrease gun violence. And I'll be forwarding a longer written version of how these funds can be used for community violence intervention programs. But I thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to present these ideas tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Candace.
I see no additional new members of the public. The chair could ask again. I now see.
Is there anyone else in the public that would like to testify this evening? Please raise your hand.
Council Vice President, if you just want to maybe remind the public how
right.
to unmute and raise their hand.
If you want to raise your hand and you're on a cell phone, it's *9 to raise your hand, and it's *6 to unmute. So is there anyone from the public that would like to speak?
So Heather Thibodeau up briefly.
Heather?
Hi,
Hello,
can you
we
guys
can hear
hear
you.
me?
Yes,
Oh.
name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name's Heather Thibodeau. I live at 137 Blackamore Ave in Cranston, kind of near City Hall. Mr. DeMaio, thank you so much for your awesome description of, oh, he's not here. Oh, yes, you are, of the ARPA funding. It is, you just did an awesome job. I practiced what I'm going to say and I clocked in at under 2 minutes. So I volunteer for the Cranston Neighborhood Tree Planting Program. My paid job is licensed clinical social worker. So I see a lot of mental health fallout from COVID. I worked from home during the height of the COVID pandemic, my living room to be exact. And not that I was slacking on the job, but looking out my front window during that time, I noticed a lot of people out walking. More neighbors than I ever even thought I had. When I worked in my garden, I saw many more people outside in their yards. Being in nature helps people deal with the stress of social isolation. Walking down a street with trees is much more pleasurable than a street without. Cooler, more sheltered, shadier. Research demonstrates that trees improve mental health. I ask you to consider increasing the Cranston neighborhood tree planting budget, which has remained the same for 7 years, because trees provide many environmental and public health benefits. I'm almost done. Funding for increased tree planting in urban areas fits ARPA goals for public health, improving mental health, and environment, including stormwater issues. And my last point, trees, as Sarah Lee mentioned at the last meeting, are essential to consider when building affordable housing or any other structure. Trees mitigate flooding, which we're seeing a lot more of. I urge you to consider trees as a tool for mitigating flooding in themselves, not just as an add-on to another project. Last point, one mature oak can absorb 50 to 200 gallons of storm water per day. That's a lot of water. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Heather, you have 2 minutes left.
I'm good. Thank you. Just thank you all for your community service, because you guys have a hard job and I go to some of those meetings and it's a long day for you. So I really thank you all.
I thought you were going to sing us a song, maybe.
Maybe next time.
Okay. Anyone else from the public like to speak? Okay. At this time, I'd like to close public hearings. Is there anyone on the council that would like to add anything before we look for adjournment of the meeting tonight? I'd like to ask Auditor DeMaio a question. In reference to question that was asked before that we didn't answer somebody's question, was that one of the questions we had put aside, or is it just something that we failed to do? Because I want to apologize to him. I'm going to probably try to contact him tomorrow.
The affordable housing, we kind of addressed even in the opening comments. That was one of the things that he had questioned. So I believe they were answered, and I wrote down the verbal questions. I'm wondering if those questions might have been put up on the screen that were directed to the council to respond to. Because he had said it was inequities and affordable housing, which we actually addressed under a broader scope, that those stuffs could be funded based on whatever plans put in place. We didn't specifically get to any one item, but as a broad scope, we did address that those could be addressed, but it just depends on what plans would be put in place.
All right. I just think we need to get a hold of him tomorrow and just try and clarify his question and see that we do a better job of getting back to him next time. Anybody else in the council like to make any comments? Councilwoman Jermaine?
Thank you, Council Vice President. I don't have really a lot of things to say. I just want to thank all the residents that took time this afternoon to come to really raise their voice, and it's important for us to hear from them. So I will I ask them to continue to show up, to raise their voice, because it's important to get a many perspective. From those perspectives, we will find the best solution to really serve the resident in Cranston. So, and also what I would like to add is I'm happy to see a many department have forward some proposals. So I had a conversation with Park and Recreation, and I know what we need forward to in terms of infrastructure, park and a playground, and mostly for Budlong Pool. So we have a great conversation, and I hope that there will be consideration as we move forward. We can have those program forward too. And mostly there was a sewer problem since 2020. Since I was appointed, we have a sewer problem in Ward 2. And that's been there for, you told me, over 10 years. And I think with this ARPA money, we will have a chance to address this sewer problem. So I'm really excited to hear more and more and from the survey and the poll. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, I would like to have a motion to, Councilwoman Renzulli?
Hi, sorry, I was trying to find the raise hand button on my iPad. I just have a quick question for, but maybe perhaps Director Strom could answer. Director Strom, the recommendations from the council are really the summary from the council based on what our constituents give us for information for their ideas and their priorities from the poll, the survey, and these meetings. We keep saying different dates. Does this need to be aligned with the mayor's budget, or is this a separate budget? Like it could be a separate budget item, ARPA funds?
In my opinion, this would be a separate funds. It is a separate fund, and it would be separate from the budget.
Okay, so we don't actually have, as much as I'm not saying I don't want to get this done quickly, I'm just saying there's no, hard date right now in alignment with the mayor to present his budget to the council because
No.
it's separate. Okay.
It is separate, and these funds are going to be utilized for whatever the administration and council agrees upon going forward. It's not something that has to be acted upon, say, by April 1st or adopted by May, say, 10th.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you for that clarification. I think that will help us do our work. Thank you so much.
Okay. In conclusion, I'd like to thank everyone that attended the meeting tonight. We're going to work hard to get this right, and we appreciate your support. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.